You're listening to the Big Cast, your source for the latest in financial technology. Brought to you weekly by the Best Innovation Group, with your hosts, John Best and Glenn Sarvati.
Welcome to another edition of the Big Cast. My name is Glenn Sarvati on behalf of the Best Innovation Group, where we like to do cool things with financial technology. And we bring you the latest here every Tuesday, usually Tuesday. I think this one might be posting a little bit later than usual, but it's extremely timely here on the Big Cast. You can always find out more about the Best Innovation Group at big-fintech.com. We've got more on our continuing series around the whole notion of artificial intelligence. Harpriya Bagri, who is with a company called Respel, which is a fairly new startup out in San Francisco that positions itself as an AI workflow company. She had a very interesting real-world application that she decided to put the latest technology of her company toward around having lost some luggage in transit to a trip, and then posted about it online. And that's what caught John's attention, and that's where we tracked her down, and we'll be talking about that in just a second. Good chance to also let you know another announcement that was made just last week, I believe it was, 5GPT. I think this was just too good to be true. It had to be, too good to pass up, I should say. It is true. It is true. We're not making it up. A joint development between Best Innovation Group with our friends at Bonify, the secure voice secure authentication, blockchain-based authentication company, putting out the best of their two products together in 5GPT based off Best Innovation Group's 5 platform. It's a comprehensive digital banking solution that brings together voice commands, call centers, and all other types of multimodal service channels. We've got a press release about that, and we also have a video that you can learn a little bit more. I'll direct you again to the Best Innovation Group website, big-fintech.com. If you go to Media and News, you'll find that. We'll also post a link to that as well as the video in our show notes, so you can track that down as well. Another one in my continuing series of, this is one of my frustrations when I see, the way that merchants basically kind of make it clear that they don't really understand the economics of card processing. Usually around the whole idea of going cashless. I've talked before about the restaurant here that says they accept credit cards only. I can't imagine that's what they mean. I got to assume that they're perfectly fine with a debit card. In fact, I had another conversation. This is not the one that I'm actually getting to today, but an aside, with another retailer, a small mom and pop shop. And I asked them again, would they rather have a debit card? They said, it's all the same. They said, the only difference is American Express. That costs us more. So what I'm hearing there is that they're being charged, again, not by the network, but by their merchant acquirer. They are being charged a blended rate for debit and credit. Therefore, it doesn't matter. Debit and credit are the same. But American Express is different because, A, we know that not only is American Express typically a higher network merchant discount rate, but there isn't any debit to offset it. So obviously it's going to look bigger. But again, it just shows that sadly, the companies who are actually paying the freight on some of this stuff don't understand it. But this one has to do specifically with a donut shop in town. And it's one of those modern hip donut shops that gets a younger clientele with a sign right on their, it's not their register. I believe it's Toast is what they use. And it says, we are cashless. And then it says, we take cards, contact payments, or exact change. Okay. So contactless payments. I think I said that wrong. But the card part makes sense. The contactless payment almost goes without saying. If, that's still a card, it's not cash. Exact change. Not sure I understand that. That would tend to imply cash, but they're cashless. I don't know. Also occurred to me, I guess it could really blow their minds. I did not notice if they had a tip jar out there. I know that same restaurant I mentioned before that is quote unquote cashless still actually encourages you to leave a tip in cash. I don't know if the restaurant does or if the workers do, but I'd love to see what would happen if the bill was, $4.12 and I gave them a $5 and said, just leave the rest for a tip. I wonder if their head would explode. I'm not exactly sure. Is that exact change? I'm not asking for change. I don't know. Anyway, that's just me ranting again. Been to a couple more conferences recently. We haven't even gotten into the main events coming up in this season, which are later in October and early November. I think you know the ones I'm referring to. But a couple of conferences that I attended, the Lend 360 conference, which took place right here in my backyard of Atlanta, Georgia, formerly known as the Online Lenders Alliance. So it's heavily involved with kind of alternative lending solutions, credit scoring for lower credit individuals, and authentication for fraud, for online usages and things like that. But some really interesting speakers, particularly the keynote that really caught my attention was Equifax on stage with a couple of their executives. And they were sharing some data from their regular monthly report they put out, publicly available, called Market Pulse. And we'll post a link to that one too. I think if you're not looking at it, it's interesting stuff. I find it to be extremely valuable just to kind of get a sense, as they say, to get a pulse on the market. And it kind of revalidates something I've been saying for a while. The trends from credit quality, write-offs, delinquencies, things like that, they're all going in the wrong direction. And that's usually what you see in the headlines. That is factually correct. The problem that you don't hear in that is that they're coming off of what were historic lows, I guess I should say, during the pandemic. People were doing extremely well in terms of their credit quality at that point because their spending was cut back, because they had additional stimulus money, et cetera, et cetera. So we are up dramatically from those extremely positive views of 2020 and 2021. Aaron Judge had a bad season because he didn't break the home run record again this year too, if you want to think about it that way. But if you look against the long-term trends, the performance is still on par, in many cases even a little bit better than all the years that preceded the pandemic. Going in the wrong direction. And if it still keeps going in the wrong direction, it's going to be a problem, and it ought to be watched. But I'm saying it's not the red flashing indicator stuff that I seem to see in the press, in my view, at this stage of the game. The other thing that they pointed out, and I've heard this in a few different settings, this came up at Finovate as well, and I wonder if this is something that's not getting quite enough attention. Student debt. And the fact, we all know that student debt is high, but the forgiveness period, or the fact that there were no payments that were required to be made on that over the course of the last 3 years or so, and now they are just starting up. I'm wondering to what extent people have fully absorbed exactly, how much that's going to impact things, in terms of the fact that from a cash flow standpoint, that's something that people may not just have money socked away to just automatically pay that and keep everything else going in the usual fashion. A couple of data points that Equifax shared that, again, I found fascinating. They find that typically a bank will find that 20% of their bank borrowing portfolio is to borrowers who have student debt as well. That one didn't surprise me so much. In fact, I would have thought maybe it might have been a little bit higher. Here's the one that kind of blew me away, though. 25% of the age 50 population still has a student debt balance. Wow. And that's 25% of the, I guess it's 25% of the credit scored individuals. But if you think back at the 50 and plus, the college rate is, I guess college graduation rate's under 50, probably more than 50% go to college at some point. And the worst situation, of course, is if you don't graduate and you still have the debt. But that one is interesting to me. There was another update around FedNow there as well that I thought was extremely interesting. Continue to add endpoints. The latest number is now 108 financial institutions that are live. Still catching up to RTP, but that number has been expanding dramatically, and I think it even better than a new endpoint in terms of an FI every day. One interesting point by the law firm Troutman Pepper, who was on that same panel, they pointed out that despite the fact that we continue to have faster payment rails, the laws really haven't changed a whole lot going all the way back to the 70s and 80s. So that's an interesting thing that at some point, I think Congress has a few other things to kind of sort out in the near term, but they're going to have to get to that too. But on that front, one of the other panelists, a bank that was on the panel, made the comment that the 60-day ACH returns window is a terrifying thing. And that kind of led to another comment that was made by another panelist that you can make an argument that faster transactions, which really concern some people from a fraud standpoint, the point that this person made was that faster transactions arguably could reduce settlement risk from the standpoint that, at least it's not going to come bouncing back to you if you can figure it out pretty quickly. So a couple of tidbits that I got at the Lend 360 conference I thought were worth passing along. Also went to another really interesting conference, an academic conference hosted by Georgia State University in conjunction with the Review of Financial Studies, which is one of the more prestigious financial services oriented journals of research papers for the academic field. Saw 15 papers that had not yet been published. A lot of them, not too surprisingly, like a lot of other things these days, focused on ChatGPT and artificial intelligence. And because these things tend to take a while to kind of percolate in the world of academia, still a lot on crypto, specifically around CBDCs. So I thought, and I'll share. I think we might actually. I'm going to reach out to a couple folks and maybe have a further conversation with them. On a related note, I was speaking to a friend of mine that came out of the fintech industry who was in the process of getting his DBA, Doctorate of Business Administration. And he made a really good point to me that, given how much information we have available, that, it would be a wonderful thing. He's looking at doing his project based on a data set that comes out of the payment space. We all know how much rich data we have. But he pointed out, and I think he's right, that there's a real blind spot here for industry to look more closely at these types of conferences. I mean, are they exactly right off the shelf ideas that are ready to be implemented in these companies? Probably not. But they've got the germ of some really interesting insights and ideas, and any little bit that you can use to learn a bit more and get ahead of the game, I think would be very interesting. I got more to say on that, but I want to get to our main attraction, so we'll come back to that in the course of the next week or two. On to our main event, Harpriya Bagri from Respel. As I mentioned before, she, I guess we can call it a viral tweet that she put out when she lost. I'm just going to set this up a bit, and then we'll go to excerpts from the town hall conversation that John Best had with Harpriya back a couple weeks ago. And we'll post the link, the entire hour-long conversation with a video that actually shows a demo will be available. You can look at that as well. But this all came about when she had her luggage lost on a trip that she was taking, a vacation, I believe, and the hassle that it takes to try to track it down. And she used the AI capabilities of her solution that her startup company is working on to basically turn the tables on the automated voice systems of the airline to basically do her bidding. And she was able to automate the process rather than her have to wait in line to get someone to talk to. She was able to use that process in order to get the information she needed. I think it'll be a little bit clearer, but I wanted to just kind of set that up. Here's our conversation from a recent town hall with a representative of Respel.
So this is the tweet, and I'm going to turn it up so you can hear it, because it blew my mind. And one of the reasons it blew my mind is when I went to Arrowhead to do my conversion, United lost my luggage. And so that's how I came across this. I think I had to show up the first day, and I'm sure, Darren's laughing at me, but I was like dressed in, I don't travel in a suit, I was in like shorts and stuff. And so it was not fun. So we're going to hear from, and gosh, I don't want to mangle her name. Is it Harpriya? Is that correct, Harpriya?
Yep. You got it.
Okay, perfect. All right. So I'm going to play this and we'll go from there. So I'm going to make it full screen and let you guys see.
Yesterday, I was on the phone with United Airlines for over 5 hours, and most of it was spent being on hold. They lost my luggage, and the only way to get updates is by calling them. And I'm not down to do that again. So I'm going to use an AI agent to call for me and get me an update. So let's see how this goes. Okay, super simple. I use the Belva agent on Respel to make the phone call for me. I passed in United Airlines customer service number, gave it this prompt, redacted my personal info here, and it's gonna give me a transcript as the output. And now we wait and see what happens.
I love it.
One eternity later.
Okay, so it's 3 hours later, and I think the call just ended. It seems like it started talking to the automated system that redirects you, but it pressed all the buttons and waited on hold, got transferred to an agent, and found out that the baggage was delayed on the East Coast. And the human said that it would take 48 more hours to get another update. But TLDR, The agent saved me a lot of time. So I'm really happy with this.
So I thought, wow, what if I could use that? You know me. First of all, I wish I had thought of that when my luggage was gone, because I had to keep calling them again and again to find out was exactly she was right. And then follow up to that was, I thought, what was she using? She mentioned this thing, Respell. What was that? You know me, I'm always poking around. So I went in the Respell and I joined. I even bought a pro account and I set it up and I did some testing and I tested it with my staff. And I had my staff pretend to be a Crayon call center member. And I had it call, and it was trying to get a 10-day payoff on my Dodge Ram 3500. I gave it the relevant information about the payoff. I gave it the relevant information about my account. I told it the last 4 digits of my social, and I gave it my secret password. This is all fake, obviously. And it was working great. It was awesome. And I was blown away.
But it just so happened, like coincidentally, that week we were developing this feature at Respell, which kind of allows this AI agent. And for those of you on the call that don't know what that means, an agent is something that just acts independently and autonomously. Like you give it instructions and it just goes off and does its thing. So you can give it any instruction possible. So we took an AI agent and combined it with the ability to make phone calls. So it gets like a voice that you can program into it, and it can make phone calls to any phone number. And so while I was testing this out and dealing with this United Airlines problem, I had a light bulb moment where I was like, wait a minute, let me just see how well this works. It ended up taking a 3-hour phone call for me and just telling me my baggage was still delayed as an update on the East Coast. And honestly, that saved me a lot of time. And while I was doing this, I was like, okay, I think more people need to know about this. And that's kind of what led to just like making that video. And it went kind of viral on Twitter. So I was really surprised, but I think a lot of people have had this problem before.
No, I think everybody in the world, this is the dream, right? And so, this is something I've been discussing on this show for a long time, which is this idea that it's almost like cloning yourself, Apriya. And there's a lot of implications to that, particularly, you're talking to a group of right now, 35 probably, executives or credit union employees of some sort. And most of them, if not every one of them, runs a call center. And it's one of the hardest things to do is to run a call center. I can see why United and Southwest and all those guys have trouble with it. But this idea that it's almost like cloning yourself, like you were able to send that thing off to do this for you while you did it. But apparently you went to the beach and hung out, which it looks beautiful.
Good move. It's almost like everybody has their own assistant now. You can have your assistant to do these kind of mundane tasks, or when things like this come up, you can employ this agent to do this stuff for you, and you can actually multitask, it sounds like.
Well, and that's what I wanted to show. So
I have a question.
Yeah.
In your 3-hour call with United, did you have to do any further prompts, or did you just kind of unleash the AI agent and let that talk to the United agent, and they just kind of went back and forth and you just followed along on the transcript? Or is that how that whole process worked?
Yeah, great question. All I had to do was literally click one button, like the run button, and that's it. The transcript just kept going. It went on for 3 hours. Like I waited on hold. It clicked all the buttons. It talked to the operator. I had to do nothing except like sit back and like glance over the transcript every once in a while.
Kind of monitor it. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Wow. Can you jump in at any time and do a new prompt or something like that? If there's something, because I think a lot of people, when they're on hold with a United or an AT&T or something like that, and they're talking to a call center person, like, and then something will, somebody will throw a curve like, oh my gosh, I didn't expect that. So can you jump in and go, hey, wait a minute? So is that possible?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And that's entirely how you prompt it, right? Okay. So right now it's only available in the enterprise feature. So I wouldn't be able to give you an exact demo right now, but essentially if you're like, okay, if asked for a human, transfer the call to this phone number, and it could be your personal cell number.
Okay.
And so you could be like, okay, I don't want this AI agent to talk on my behalf, because whatever complex use case it is or whatever, you could say, okay, when you're connected to a human being, connect me on the other line. And so you're just creating your own systems for that. Yeah.
So two thoughts. One is, that this could this be used for reliability monitoring of an IVR system? And second one is, once you can emulate voices, does that mean that the voice biometric is no longer safe for authentication in telebanking IVR systems?
Yeah, good question.
I'll
I'm gonna-
take one of those, Harpriya.
okay.
So we have tested, I'm presuming that you're using the Tortoise TTS like everyone else for the voice cloning, which is the premier voice cloning algorithm out there. And we've been testing with Illuma Labs and some of the others, and so far we haven't been able to get by it with the voice cloning. So they're holding tight for now with the current quality. There's something in the cadence or how it speaks or whatever that still triggers Nuance and Illuma Labs, or at least Illuma Labs. I'm pretty sure Nuance as well. And also those companies are actively pursuing products like, for example, Tortoise TTS, which is the underlying software for the voice cloning that 11 Labs uses, and some of the others have put together detectors that these other solutions who do voice authentication now can use to see if it's a simulated voice. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Harpriya. You haven't
No.
had the benefit of seeing all the shows, but we talked about this a couple weeks ago, or maybe a month ago.
Gotcha.
We tried
No,
to
gotcha.
defeat Wells Fargo's voice authentication, but we couldn't do it at the time.
That's interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of 11 Labs. It's really cool to, I don't know if you've seen this, but this is as an aside. There's like Donald Trump and Joe Biden like fighting over some video game, and you could just
Oh,
like
yeah.
clone their voices, and
11 Labs.
there's a bunch of stuff online. Yeah, 11 Labs. It's
pretty
great.
cool. So with that in mind,
I can
what was the
maybe do like
previous
the,
question? What was his other question? So
The other question was using this
Oh,
for reliability monitoring.
yes, I think you could.
Call every 10 minutes and check for status.
So going back to that, Harpriya, one of the things you said during this goes to your question. You said during the call was that on your little tweet, not a little tweet, your tweet that blew up and caught my attention, was that it had basically pressed the right buttons. So
Mhm.
in that world, usually it's what we call DTMF tones. You may be aware of that, but for those of you who aren't, when you press a button on your phone, it goes boop in a different tone. That tone is what tells the other side what button you pressed, the modulation or the pitch of that tone. And so I was really interested, and this may get back to you showing us how you wrote the little program, which I'd love to see for everybody, because I think there's other use cases. But yeah, I think you could use this to test an IVR very easily. But the thing is it's got to be able to press some buttons. And so I'm interested to see how she did that, because I couldn't figure out how to do that.
Or just for the new conversational style IVRs.
Yeah, those for sure, probably. You wouldn't have to do anything but just check that. I agree.
so this is all it took to build it, and I can even recreate this, and it shouldn't take more than like 60 seconds. But essentially, this is what the Respot editor looks like. Like I said earlier, with any early technology, the more you use it, the faster it improves. And so we're seeing a lot of like fast improvements, because I think when we first developed it, it was really hard to do like very long phone calls. But as we got like more and more people use it, so right now we're partnering up with like a bunch of legal tech firms and insurance companies that will make these automated phone calls to verify insurance for all their customers, which is like a use case that takes up just a lot of phone call and waiting time. So things like that are actually helping the AI get better. And so we're seeing a lot of improvements like week over week almost.
One thought I had, Mike and Harpriya, was I think there's outbound calling to be done from credit unions. One of the ones I always talk about is if direct deposit stops, it would be cool to just let this thing call and say, hey, I noticed that your direct deposit stopped, and we just wanted to call and check in and find out if there was some problem with our service or if it was in error. And you get a transcript back, and people, I mean, you could just set it up and let it go. And the thing is that there's a lot of things. So let me throw some stuff at you, Harpriya, and see what you say, and so we'll get into the discussion portion of this. What happens if I hang up on this thing? Is it just going to keep calling until it succeeds at wishing me
Can I
happy
call you back?
birthday?
So that's all within the settings, right? So within your prompt, you can have it such that, for example, if someone doesn't pick up on the first try, it calls 2 more times. If you hang up though, it's likely the end of the call and it won't call you back unless you have it in your objective to call back a certain amount of times until it fulfills its goal.
So if I put in my prompt, you know, keep calling and up to 10 times until you get the 10-day payoff, then it could, you know, even, so let's say, well, let's start here. Let's pick somebody. I think it was
I think Gary brings up a
She
good
was-
point.
What's that?
I think Gary brings up a good point about scammers.
Yeah,
Using
scammers
this
for
for-
sure.
Yeah, that was going to be my response to that one, is like, in the back end, we have it limited to 3 times, like 3 attempts max. It's set to override, I guess, like on a per customer basis, but that would be the reason that we wouldn't do that, is like, you don't want our service or any number to be like marked as spam, or just even like be annoying from like a customer perspective.
So let's say that this is calling in, you know, on behalf of, it could be, so in our world, we have this thing called synthetic account takeover, where they get the credentials and they basically would know my social and they would know a lot of stuff. And what they would do is they would call in and try to create a some sort of ACH or a wire to send that out. So I could see this, you know, not your specific product, Harpreet, but this technology being used for that for sure. And probably will be, because about 2 years ago, and Julie pointed this out, Google tried to put something out called Duplex. And he demonstrated it calling and making a hair appointment. And it sounded a lot like this at the time. I don't think this is Duplex behind the scenes. I think this is Belva, right? Belva AI that's making the call.
Mhm.
Which, by the way, you can't even get to. The only way you can use it is through Respell, because they're in a wait list, as far as I know. But what was interesting about it, that call was it made a hair appointment on their behalf. But I never saw it really come to fruition. I never could really find where to set it up in the Google Assistant. It's like Sergey showed it on one of the Google things in like 2018 or something, or 2019, just before the pandemic. But so these folks that are using it for the outbound calls, I assume they're using the design tool that you just showed and saying, okay, here's a spreadsheet of calls to make. Here's your prompt. And obviously they're testing it on themselves first, because your prompt here is a little, you know, like the prompts probably usually define a little bit of a personality. I found that works best. You're my agent, you're acting on my behalf. But that's, you know, that was something that I thought was very interesting. And then with Duplex Assistant, I wasn't able to go and attach it to sending it yet to another model, the output of that, and being able, that was really cool how you set that to Chat GPT-4 and then said summarize it. And presumably another section could have been added in. I saw there was a data connection that could be put into a database, or it could have been emailed to somebody or something along those lines.
Yeah. Honestly, I remember seeing that initial like Google I/O. What was it like? Like, you know, like with the Google Assistant. I think it's really unfortunate that it didn't take off. But my theory is that it was because of like the lack of customizability. Like, sure, you can make a hair appointment, but there's a lot more that you can do with it. There's a lot more that you can make for it to be powerful and useful for you. And so you can also use this to make your hair appointment, but then you can get it to be like, okay, send me inspiration for haircuts based on how long the appointment is. And then it'll give you images, or it'll mark a time on your calendar, or, you know, there's very, very complex things you can do. And I think it's because of all of those integrations.
So like I say, there's a lot more where that came from. There's an hour-long conversation that goes along with a video where you can follow along on screen and see some really interesting stuff about the way this workflow AI solution is actually being put to practice. So I'll post a link to that in our show notes, which you can find at the website, or you should find it wherever you're picking up your podcast on Apple Music, Spotify, etc., along with other links that were relevant to the conversations that we've been having today. So thanks again to Harpreet. I think it's a fascinating situation. As John said, he's run into the same problem with lost luggage, so I think a lot of us can relate to that. With that, another episode of the Big Cast in the books. Again, my name is Glenn Sarvati. You can track me down via my firm 154 Advisors. And it just occurred to me that I kept saying viral tweet, and I will continue to say viral tweet and not viral X. That's just the way it is. And if you want to find me on X or Twitter or whatever you want to call it, I'm at 154 Advisors. You can find the Best Innovation Group at Big FinTech, or our Grand Poobah John Best at JB FinTech. You will find us all as well, John Best, Glenn Sarvati, and the Best Innovation Group on LinkedIn. And you can find us wherever you pick up your podcasts. Again, as I said, Spotify, Apple Music, etc. If you are interested, please do subscribe. We have new content every week. If you go to the website, you can also find a vast archive of past episodes. Again, big-fintech.com. Go to the media tab and you will be inundated. Let's put it that way. Lots more good stuff coming up over the course of the next couple of weeks as we work our way into the heat of the conference season. As always, thanks for listening.
Check back each week for the latest from the Big Cast. Or better yet, we hope you'll consider subscribing for free via Spotify, Stitcher, Apple, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you have questions or comments, we'd love to hear from you. Tweet us at Big FinTech, email info@big-fintech.com, or visit us at big-fintech.com and click on the Media tab, where you can post a comment or check out our archive of hundreds of past episodes. See you next week.